Hello and welcome to Rogues Reads. We are up to week 3 and we are just about finished with our book. Rogue is here. He doesn't really look too interested today, but our book has a really exciting conclusion that I'm very excited to share with you guys. Let me get the camera set up and back in my spot here. All right, so it is Monday. I don't know about you guys, but the days are all starting to blur together for me. But it is Monday, so we are ready to pick back up with Coke and Pepsi as we finish up the Genius Files, Mission Unstoppable. I do have book 2, which is Never Say Genius, ready to go. We will start it on Wednesday because we are going to finish this one up today and tomorrow. I just actually finished book 2 and I thought it was even more fun than book 1. So I hope you guys are enjoying this book series. I haven't seen any feedback, yes or no, if you want me to continue. So I'm going to because I think they're a lot of fun. I didn't introduce myself. Hopefully by now you know who I am. I am Renee. I am the children's librarian at Salem Public Library in Salem, Ohio. And this is Rogues Reads, which is our virtual book club for kids in grades 4 to 8. Daisy Ray is bringing me toys here. Daisy Ray is our mascot for our younger book club. And Griffin is laying right beside me as always. Rogue's back there on the couch. So we gotta finish it up. Lots of exciting things. Where did we leave off on Friday? If you're just now joining us, I'm going to highly recommend, because we are 5 chapters from the end of this book. This is book 1 in the series though, so if you go back 2 weeks, you can start over. You can start with the very beginning of the book and hear the whole thing. From there, all the videos are saved, so you should be able to find all of them. They're labeled with either day or episode, and they should go in order. So this is The Genius Files, Mission Unstoppable by Dan Gutman. Look close, I know it's backwards, but you can see it. And this title is available on Hoopla, which is through the library, and you can get a copy of it so that you can read right along with me. It's a great way to improve your own reading skills. So go get a digital copy and read along with me. It's seriously a really fun book. And a lot of the things that are kind of hard for me to include while I'm reading is, and we talk a lot about using the maps and like using Google Maps to see everywhere that Coke and Pepsi are going. But there's these little map directions throughout the book that I really haven't been sharing because they're just kind of hard to share. If you've got a copy of the book through Hoopla or Libby or whoever you're choosing to read it, you can follow right along with those. So I feel like I have been chatting quite a bit here, and I want to get started and find out what happens to Coke and Pepsi. If you remember on Friday, Mrs. Higgins, the evil health teacher who had locked them in the school and tried to burn it down, but a week ago, and wow, a lot has happened in a week in this book. She has reappeared at the largest ball of twine, or the second largest, we're still not sure which one's bigger, and is preparing to blow it up. And Pep and Coke stopped her by emptying their RV's sewage tank. Gross. It was a week's worth of human waste directly onto her in her car to stop her. They had just made it back when their parents saw their parents, who said, "You're grounded." I decided I thought it was worth being grounded to stop Mrs. Higgins. Hopefully you guys will agree, but I guess you don't have to. Get a drink of water here before I get started. Okay, and we are on chapter 20, Grounded. The twins had done a lot of foolish things in their lives to make their parents angry. There was the time they jumped off a trampoline with umbrellas, the time they dialed 911 to see how long it would take for the cops to show up. Oh, don't do that. The time they thought it would be fun to roll down the hill near the mall in shopping carts. Coke wound up in the emergency room after that one. Yeah, that one sounds dangerous too. Sorry, my dogs like to bark at everything outside. Shh. Hush. But they had never done anything as foolish, dangerous, and yes, let's say it, stupid, as going on a joyride in a recreational vehicle. Are you kids out of your minds? Mrs. McDonald shouted when Coke pulled the RV back into the parking spot. Do you have one brain between the two of you? What were you thinking? We could all be in jail right now. You said you were going to look for souvenirs. Where were you? We thought the RV had been stolen. Veins were sticking out of Mrs. McDonald's neck. People were starting to stare, and it was causing a scene on the street. Oh, don't worry, Dr. McDonald assured the gathering crowd. This isn't child abuse, folks. Stop. Sorry. My kids just went out for a little ride in our rented RV. They turn 13 years old the day after tomorrow. I guess they think they're old enough to drive now. Can't blame you for screaming at them, pal, a guy walking by said. If they were my kids, I'd ship them off to military school. I might need to ship a dog off to military school. Daisy Rat, come here. Come here. Stop. I don't even think there's anybody out there. We're really sorry, Dad, Pep said sincerely as she scampered into the back seat where she belonged. We'll never do it again. Well, why did you do it this time? Asked her mother. Do you have an explanation? I'd like to hear it. Pep looked at her brother, who was slinking out of the driver's seat. We went to do a dump, Coke said. It was the truth, technically. You went to do a dump? Dr. McDonald was incredulous. That was the job you gave me, Coke reminded him. The holding tank was really full, Dad. I promised I would do a dump today, and I felt bad that I forgot to do it yesterday. I always keep my promises, you know. Dr. McDonald was too upset to speak. He slapped his forehead and walked around in a circle on the sidewalk, trying to regain his composure. Who said you could drive? Asked Mrs. McDonald. You're always telling us that we should take the initiative, Coke said lamely. You're minors, Dr. McDonald said, exploding. It's against the law for you to drive a motor vehicle. You could have been arrested. Mom and I could have been arrested. The police would say we're neglecting our kids. Did you ever think of that? Calm down, Dad, Coke said. You'll give yourself a coronary. Everything's fine. We did the dump. The RV doesn't have a scratch on it, and nobody got hurt. So what's the big deal? Dr. McDonald climbed into the driver's seat, mumbling, It's a rental! And how this sort of thing never happened when he was a kid. He drove out of Darwin aggressively, stomping on the gas pedal at every green light and stomping on the brake when the lights turned red. It was the only way he could express his anger. They drove in silence for several miles until Coke worked up the courage to speak. May I ask one question, Dad? What is it? Dr. McDonald said sharply. When we're at home and you ground us, we have to stay in the house. I understand that. But how do you ground us when we're in an RV? Pep rolled her eyes. Sometimes she wished her brother would just keep his mouth shut. I'll tell you how, Dr. McDonald replied. Your mother and I are going out to a nice dinner and a movie tonight. Alone. You two are going to stay at the campground and think about what you did. Fair enough, Coke said sheepishly. I don't know if you've ever stayed at an RV campground. Some of them are fully equipped with game rooms, stores, ping pong tables, swimming pools, basketball courts, Wi-Fi, and videos. Others just have an electrical hookup for your RV, a septic tank so you can do a dump, and pretty much nothing else. Mrs. McDonald purposely found a campground for the night that had no amenities. The place was basically a big parking lot with an office. After he checked in, Dr. McDonald told the twins to get out of the RV. We'll be at the movies, he said. See if you can make it through the next few hours without getting into trouble. And with that, Dr. and Mrs. McDonald drove away. It does seem like they always get in trouble when their parents leave them, so I don't know about that, but man, that would be really boring just to sit in the camp. They don't even have the RV to sit in. What do you want to do? Pep asked. I don't know. What do you want to do? Her brother replied. I asked you first. There wasn't a whole lot to do. The twins put their backpacks on the nearest picnic table. Coke took out the frisbee and flipped it casually to his sister. Then he ran about 10 yards out into the parking lot. Do you think what we did was wrong? Pep asked as she flipped the frisbee back to him. Mrs. Higgins tried to kill us, Coke said. All we did was do a dump on her head. No, Pep said, catching his return throw. I mean, was it wrong to drive the RV? Oh, Coke replied, well, yeah, that was wrong. But it was right to do the dump on Mrs. Higgins' head because it prevented her from blowing up the ball of twine. And how could we do the dump on her head and prevent her from blowing up the ball of twine if we didn't drive the RV? The right we did compensated for the wrong we did. So all in all, I say we did the right thing. Pep couldn't argue with his logic. It was fun, wasn't it? Coke asked. Doing the dump, I mean. Yeah, she giggled. They threw the Frisbee back and forth a number of times, and Coke had to admit that his sister was getting better. She had learned to hold the Frisbee level as she released it. She didn't throw it very hard, but she was throwing it accurately. He hardly ever had to go chase it down. When they got tired of playing Frisbee, they opened their backpacks looking for something else to do. Pez dispensers, yo-yos, balls of twine, and the deck of cards were scattered across the picnic table. Pep pulled out her pad and suddenly remembered the most recent Cypher they'd received. In all the excitement, she had completely forgotten about it. They did get another Cypher. This was the one with all the numbers. I know you're not going to be able to see it very well, but it's the one with all the numbers. I don't know if I actually posted it in the comments. I will do that. Together they sat down at the picnic table and examined the Cypher closely. The numbers in the first row were all higher than the numbers in the second row, Coke said. Brilliant Einstein, his sister replied. Did you notice that all the numbers in the bottom row are all 1, 2, or 3, except a single 4? The numbers must correspond to letters in some way. It can't be as simple as 1 means A, 2 means B, and so on, because the bottom row would be almost all the same 3 letters. I can see some patterns, Pep pointed out. In the top row, 843 is repeated 3 times. And in the bottom row, 122 is repeated 3 times. And look, the repeating digits are in the same place, on top of each other. That's got to mean something. The top and bottom rows are related to each other in some way, Coke guessed. Maybe the code is 636232 and so on. At that point, Coke's cell phone beeped. A text had come in from his father. You kids okay? We're sorry we got so mad. Coke texted back. No problem. Hey, Pep said suddenly. Let me see your phone for a sec. Why? Just let me see it. He handed his sister the cell and she peered at the keypad. Her eyes widened and a smile spread slowly across her face. Okay, I'm going to stop right here because I think 10 years ago, a lot of kids would have figured this cipher out pretty quickly. I actually did. This was one of the few that I got. But with smartphones now, I don't know that you guys would. So hang with me for just a minute here, and we're going to see if they can figure it out. Look, she said excitedly, there are no 1s on the top line of the cipher. So, just like the number 1 on the telephone keypad has no letters to go with it. I don't read you, Coke said, confused. Don't you see, Pep said. Number 2 on the telephone keypad represents the letters A, B, and C. Number 3 represents D, E, and F. Number 4 represents G, H, and I, and so on. Each number on the keypad stands for 3 letters. But that doesn't help us, Coke said, because every number in the cipher can be any of 3 different letters. That's right. It's the bottom row that tells us which letter it is, Pep said excitedly. See, the first column of numbers is 6 and 3. So the 6 on the keypad represents the letters M, N, and O. And the 3 tells us it's the 3rd letter. So the message begins with the letter O. This is how we used to text. If you wanted an O, you had to press the 6 3 times. And the 3 tells us it's the 3rd letter, so the message begins with the letter O. Well, if 6 and 3 equals the letter O, Coke said, then the next letter in the message is represented by 6 and 2, and that would be, they looked at the keypad and said it together, N. The next number was a 3 with a 2 underneath it. They looked at the keypad and saw that the 3 could be D, E, or F, and the 2, that it was the second of those, the letter E. 1. Pep said as she wrote it down on her pad. That's probably the first word of the message. The twins quickly figured out that every time there was... Oh, I'm sorry, guys. All right, every time there was an 8 on the top row and a 1 was beneath it, that letter represented the letter T. They rushed to fill in the rest of the letters. 625 meant o'clock. 5863 meant June. 893689 meant 20. 34384 meant 5th. The infinity room, the Coke said excitedly. 843463464897666 means the infinity room. And 84346873668437625 means, Pep said as she worked it out, the house on the rock. They repeated the message out loud together. 1 o'clock, June 25th, the infinity room, the house on the rock. Okay, we've been trying to figure out this house on the rock since the beginning, right? I don't know. Let's see if they can track it down. That's so chapter 21, A Wrong Turn. Now the twins were furious. The house on the rock! Coke ripped the sheet of paper out of the pad, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it in the trash can next to the picnic table. What is this with a house on a rock? He sputtered. If they wanted us to go to this stupid house so badly, why don't they tell us where it is? Oh no, that would make too much sense. And today's June 23rd, Pep said, checking the date on the cell phone. We only have 2 days to get there. The sound of wheels on gravel made the twins look up and see the family's RV pulling into the parking lot. It was hard to believe 3 hours had gone by. Pep slipped her pad back into her backpack so her parents wouldn't see it. What have you kids been doing? Dr. McDonald said cheerfully as he hopped out of the driver's seat. The movie must have been a comedy, the twins figured. Any anger their parents felt before they left was gone. Nothing exciting, Coke replied. Played frisbee mostly. Their parents sat down at the picnic table with leftovers they had brought back from dinner and gave the food to the kids. They said they had done some thinking about the rest of the trip. Aunt Judy's wedding would be in Washington on July 4th, so they had 11 days to drive 1,167 miles. Mrs. McDonald felt that there was plenty of time to stop off at interesting spots along the way and gather information for Amazing But True. She pulled a Minnesota guidebook out of her purse. They were an hour and a half from Minneapolis, she told them, and with that as a starting point, they could check out the Mall of America. It was one of the biggest malls in the world, and it was right nearby. In Belle Plaine, there was a 2-story outhouse that attracts a lot of tourists. 2-story outhouse? Ew. But that would be an hour out of the way, a long way to go to see a toilet. In Rothsay, Minnesota, there was a 9,000-pound statue of a chicken. And in Frazee, there was the world's largest turkey. In a town called Virginia, they had a giant floating statue of the Minnesota state bird, the loon. But it was more than 3 hours north. And the Sandpaper Museum in Two Harbors, Minnesota was almost as far. A sandpaper museum? Where do people come up with these things? If they were going to go that far north, they might as well drive a little farther to Hibbing, which was the home of the world's largest open-pit iron ore mine, and also the boyhood home of Bob Dylan. I could spend a month just in Minnesota, Mrs. McDonald said wistfully. No wonder the state bird is a loon, Coke remarked. Anything in your guidebook about houses on rocks? Coke asked. No, his mother replied. Why? Just wondering. There was no way for the twins to find where the mysterious house on the rock was located. They would just have to wait and hope they received another cipher. In the end, Mrs. McDonald decided to visit just one location in Minneapolis, the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices. Mrs. McDonald read out loud from her guidebook and described this amazing museum that collected 250 weird contraptions that supposedly used electricity, radio waves, magnets, or vibrations to cure everything from arthritis to acne. A century ago, apparently, bogus scientists spent a lot of time dreaming up fraudulent devices such as the bioelectric shield, the dynameter, and Boyd's battery, which hung around the neck to ward off the Earth's magnetic rays. The rejuvenator reversed the aging process. The spectrochrome used 6 colored lights to cure 6 different diseases if you sat in front of it with no clothes on. Oh, yikes. The psychograph was a bowl-shaped sensor that you put on your head to measure the bumps to determine your personality traits. So, the bumps on your head can tell your personality? Anybody who used one of those things should have his head examined, Coke remarked. Yeah, that don't sound very effective. The next morning, June 24th, the McDonald's headed for St. Paul. The address for the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices, interestingly, turned out to be the same as for the Science Museum of Minnesota. Excuse me, Mrs. McDonald, asked the lady at the information desk. Where's the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices? I'm very sorry, the lady replied, but that museum is closed. Well, when does it open? Never, the lady said. It closed a few years ago. What do you mean it's closed? Mrs. McDonald put her hands on her hips and her voice rose. Calm down, Bridge, Dr. McDonald said. I'm very sorry, the lady behind the desk said, but that museum no longer exists. Do you know who I am? Mrs. McDonald shouted. I run a very popular website called Amazing But True. Maybe you've heard of it. Pep said. No, I haven't heard of your website, the lady said, looking around for a guard. I'm sorry, ma'am. My family and I drove all the way from California, Mrs. McDonald shouted. We want to see the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices. Bridge, you're making a scene. It wasn't exactly true that they drove all the way from California just to see the museum, but it gave more weight to Mrs. McDonald's indignation. We do have a few of the devices from that museum on display in a room here, the lady said apologetically, but that's all. This is not right, Mrs. McDonald shouted. The Museum of Questionable Medical Devices was in the guidebook. You must have an old guidebook, ma'am. I'm going to talk to the manager, Mrs. McDonald said, and then she stormed off in a huff. Well, that was embarrassing, Cook said to his sister, after their mother was gone. Do museums often have managers? Asked Pep. While Mrs. McDonald was looking for a place to lodge a complaint, Dr. McDonald went to sit down on a bench. The twins wandered around the lobby. Lining the wall was a rack filled with maps and dozens of sightseeing brochures. The twins strolled over to look at them. There were colorful brochures advertising other nearby museums, amusement parks, theme restaurants, underground caves, and stores selling everything from Christmas ornaments to gourmet popcorn. Suddenly, Pep gasped and sank to her knees. What is it? Coke asked, putting an arm around his sister. Are you okay? Do you need some water or something? She just pointed at the bottom of the rack. Coke bent down to see the brochure she was pointing at, and it looked like this. The House on the Rock! They found it, or at least a pamphlet for it. It's a real place. And it's just called the House on... You know what? They could have Googled it. I don't know. That's probably the first thing I would have done. It was to Google something like that, but maybe they just didn't think to. Okay, we are going to stop right there because we have 3 chapters left to finish out this book, and we will do that tomorrow. So, thanks for watching. Rogue got all of his stripes all groomed up, and now he's taking a nap. So, yeah, he's already heard the story, so I guess he's just not going to be that active of a participant today. Hi, buddy. So hopefully you guys are all staying safe, staying dry on this kind of rainy, dreary day. Hopefully we get some sunshine tomorrow, and I will see you guys then. Thanks. Bye.